This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Okay, good morning everybody, and good evening if you are in other parts of the world. We are talking about The Stands, Sovietistan by Erika Fatland. I have seen other covers actually from other people, but we've got the same one. So welcome, Justin.
Thank you.
You are my usual book club host, but you are extra special and extra useful this time because you have been in this region and I have not. So you are very vital.
Unlike the one to Japan where I've never been to last time, I've actually been to some of these places.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we've swapped roles this time. So what was your overall impression of Sovietistan?
Look, I really like the book, but I think people probably need to... It's quite a informative and... I won't say serious. I guess it's not like one of those travel writers with full of funny tales and everything like that, because there's very few funny stories in it, but there's a lot of well-researched stuff about the people, the leaders, especially the politics. And then there's a lot of meeting local people and seeing their stories. And a lot of them are not necessarily great, but it's also very informative at how the people really live in that part of the world. I really liked it, but I think if you just got to go in realising that you're going to get a lot of information as well that she's researched, which is great.
There were parts that
it's not just her tales on the road. Yeah, it's not just her tales from travelling. There's a lot of background information and a lot of other stuff that she's researched, and that's great because she's clearly very knowledgeable of the whole region before she wrote the book. So absolutely. I agree with most of what she said. I can't think of anything there where I go, I didn't get that impression when I was there, or and there's a few things there I thought, I did hear something about that, and she's put more detail into the book. So I think for anyone wondering what these places are like, they might want to go there. This is not a bad book to read. I think it would probably be the one I would recommend people to read.
Right, So, certainly from what you've told me before and other people, it seems pretty accurate, an accurate traveller's impression of the Stands.
I think it was Colin Thubron. I'm not sure if I've pronounced it right. He's written a lot about there. That's what I read before I read some of his books on Central Asia. Mm-hmm. But I think this one's got a lot more detail in it. And it was written about the time I was there. I think she was there maybe a couple of years. I was 2012, and I think she was 2014 maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's where I've... Yeah.
Yes, it was 2014. I checked at some stage. So it would have been really similar to your experiences, I guess. So,
and I think things have changed quite rapidly based on what I've heard from the outside of there now and what's changed since I went there. So
and even some of her footnotes throughout as
well.
Noting changes in leadership occasionally. Not that leaders seem to change very often in Central Asia, but a few things like that. So
and even things like getting visas for these countries, other than I think Turkmenistan, I think the other four are not that hard anymore. They've all got either visas on arrival or visas at the airport or e-visas. So, and certainly I know Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan definitely, and I think Kazakhstan as well. I'm not sure about Tajikistan, but Turkmenistan's still a very weird place to get into, and
Turkmenistan seems to be a very weird place in all aspects, not just visa requirements. So,
that's right. That's right.
It's interesting, hey? We were just chatting. So, obviously she's a journalist and has a lot of knowledge of the area. And I was showing Justin, I got this book at the library recently, which is her other book called The Border, which is basically a tale of travelling around the border of Russia, which is obviously large and covers a lot of different countries. So through North Korea, China, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, blah, blah, blah. And yes, quite a hefty tome. But I think interesting. I haven't read it and it might be a summer read. I'm not sure yet. I've got so many books and so little time. So we will see. But what we thought we'd do today is chat a little bit kind of country by country, because we've both picked out a few of our kind of favourite parts from each of the each of the stands that she travelled to. Some of the most intriguing bits, I suppose, or the most curious parts. And as usual, a lot of our most interesting bits overlap. But also I want to hear, your reflections as well, Justin, from your own experiences. So,
yes.
If you're watching also, by the way, and you have anything to add or questions or thoughts, just throw them in the comments. I'm monitoring the comments here as well. So Turkmenistan is where it all began. And as we've already said, Turkmenistan is a particularly interesting place. When I did a poll in the group, I think there was only 2 group members who had been there. Justin and you were one of them. So it was one of the least visited stands amongst our group, which makes a lot of sense. In the past, kind of what I knew about it was, the leader who changes the days of the week and the months of the year to reflect his name and his family names and things like that. And, all of those really can you believe this happened? Kind of almost clickbaity headlines. That was kind of my impression of Turkmenistan.
Yeah.
I have to say the chapter kind of just confirmed that, but yeah.
and of course that guy passed away. He was one of the few leaders who actually have been changed, mostly because he died, and that was mid 2000s. So even by the time I got there, his reputation and was still intact. And I did mention before we came online that how in many ways it's got a lot of similarities with North Korea, and how it's probably a more accessible place to visit if you want to go to a country that's had some of this style of leadership to see what it's like. I'm not saying, everyone should go because everyone makes their own decisions on these things, but yeah. And the latest leader I don't think is quite out there, but certainly I think his portraits are up quite a lot of places, along with the previous leaders and the leader. So there's only been 2, and I don't think he's changed his name or changed the name of towns or the calendar to after his mother and himself. And
not
some of it
was,
and I don't think he's built as many golden statues of himself or anything like that. But
it seems like there's no more room for more marble buildings by the sounds of it. So
no. And it's everything described in the book is just spot on. It's just such an interesting place to go because you see the infrastructure that's built in the capital city is amazing, but there's hardly anyone there. I think the population is only a few 100,000 people, and this vast marble city full of marble buildings and statues and things like that. I think I wrote down I arrived in the middle of the night and I was on a plane from China. I got to the border and I had a visa, and it was the first time I really travelled somewhere where you're sort of thinking, is this safe? Is this the right thing to do? Yeah. And got through smoothly and had a pickup all arranged because, again, I didn't want to deal with taxis or anything like that. So they took me into the hotel. There was no one around. It was late at night, and I just thought that was normal. Yet I woke up the next day, and there's still no one around.
It was not a function of being midnight.
Yeah. No.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Oh, it sounds like a very fascinating place to visit. My favourite part in the chapter was the special horse days, the horse celebration, and when they're waiting for anything to happen, and the president comes out and falls off the horse, but that moment was deleted from everybody's memory and memory cards.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because when I was there, I'd never got the impression that horses were as important to, say, Turkmenistan as they were when I was in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan.
Oh, interesting.
But I wasn't there for a long time, so I certainly spent more time in the other 3 countries I visited in the region. They had a lot of camels and stuff as well, like the markets had camels for sale, and so I didn't see the horses and everything like that. So that was the only thing I didn't really see a lot of. But yeah, it's not that it's definitely probably the case.
Yes, and perhaps she saw a lot of it because she was there at that particular time with
the time,
very important horse celebration kind of stuff. So it sounded also excruciating to sit and watch nothing for hours. But one of those memorable experiences, I guess. You also, Justin, in your notes to me, talked about the internet.
I wasn't really sure. This is also one of the first times I've been. I guess I'd been to Africa, so Africa was also where you don't know what internet you're going to get. But yeah, you kind of like, I said to people, look, I may be not online. And yeah, in 2012, everyone sort of had the internet and was relying on it quite a lot. And I just said, look, I may not be around have access to the internet for a week or so. So I said, don't worry.
If you don't hear from me. Yeah.
I will try and contact you. Just let everyone know I'm fine. And I didn't think there's probably no risk. Like, all these countries are really safe for travelers. Like, as long as you don't do anything silly.
Yes.
And I think even if you took photos of the government buildings, they would just tell you to delete them in Turkmenistan. That was what I was told.
And
no, they'll just make sure you've deleted everything. But yeah, I turned up and the hotel apologised. The internet was turned off in the country for days. And my guide that I had, he said the same thing. He says, I don't know. They don't tell us. They just turn it off. And
I mean, it's amazing. It's not even just that they're saying, you know, that it's broken or that there's some issues. It's just, it's turned off. Like, that's it. No
now,
internet.
from an outsider's point of view, you probably think someone's done something they shouldn't have done, so they've turned it off.
Yeah, so that no one can.
It's damage control
anything.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the locals wouldn't say anything like that. Certainly, the guide there was very reserved. He didn't want to. He would not say anything that you couldn't lead him into a conversation about these things. He just wasn't. He wasn't really that engaging either. He was only interested in doing his job. And
right, yeah, I guess it's tricky, isn't it? Probably tricky to find a guide who is, I guess, the kind of guide we would really want, because what we really want is to find out all the true stories. But obviously, it's pretty risky for them to discuss it. So yeah.
So they, and I mean, and I think, as I said before, coming online, not that I've been to North Korea, Turkmenistan. As a tourist, you have a lot more freedoms. You know, like, they're not following you around the whole time. You can wander through Ashgabat without a guide and go have a look around and see what you want to see. And even through the country, you can do it if you want to. But at the same time, you don't want to do anything that is going to draw attention to yourself. I wouldn't be flying a drone or doing massive video productions or being a journalist, for example.
Yes, exactly. Then you can probably get possibly too much attention. Okay, Turkmenistan, tick. Interesting place. So
and I think it's still hard to get into. I think you do need some kind of letter of invitation or a company to get you in. So don't feel like you've got to rush out and see it. But it is
I don't think it's going to change very quickly either. So I think it'll be a fascinating place for many years to come, I imagine. So.
And I think she's captured it in a book. I think if you read the book and it really does interest you, then sure, go and check it out. But
next in line is Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan is the only. I haven't been to any of these stands, but I did have a little bit of a sense of what it's like. I feel I've been able to talk at length about Kazakhstan with a local once she'd moved here. But still, I learnt so much by reading this. But before we dive into Kazakhstan, I actually just want to read this quote that was in the Kazakhstan chapter, which is a perfect Thoughtful Traveller's quote, and I just loved it. So Erika wrote, "Why do we travel? Why do we put ourselves through all the discomfort that moving across great distances and staying in faraway foreign lands usually entails? My theory is that nature has equipped us with deceitful, flawed memories. That is why we forever set off on new adventures. Once we are home again, the discomfort transforms itself into amusing anecdotes or is forgotten." And I thought that's very apt. I think we thoughtful travellers who, especially, travel independently, have all sorts of crazy stuff happen. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes we're a bit miserable. But once we're home, we just can't wait to do it again. It's a bit like giving birth to children. You forget about all the worst part. And that's why people ever have siblings. So,
and that, I think that there was a mention of the Soviet nostalgia in Kazakhstan. And I think Kazakhstan is the most Soviet still or Russian of all those stands. It's the one where you feel like nothing much has changed. Maybe there's out in the countryside, things have changed a fair bit, but they still had, their economy was reasonably good. There were working ATMs, I think, as I mentioned. There was international brand clothing stores, things like that you just didn't see in the other four countries. And that's where this whole, she mentioned the Soviet nostalgia came up as well in the book. And I think if you did come across any of these people, especially of Russian descent, they had these memories of how good life was in the USSR. Whereas I guess in other parts of the world they may not have that. I don't know.
Well, actually, when I lived
it
in
seems less
Slovakia,
so in some of them.
yeah, even when I lived in Slovakia, I would find people, even my age, who did have that an element of that Soviet nostalgia because their economies were just never as well, not never as good, obviously, but they still, there was a lot of issues that still weren't present in Soviet times. So I think that Soviet nostalgia, at least elements of it, is really widespread. So yeah,
I don't think I found as much. Yeah, I don't think I found as much in the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, because the standard of living there has actually improved.
Yeah,
it has actually improved in those countries, whereas Georgia and Armenia and Azerbaijan, I think, is a bit of a mixed bag. I think it's based on age and stuff there as well. But in these states where the standard of living probably hasn't improved and may have gone downhill for many, exactly. I think there's a lot of that.
Yeah. Now, what did I want to quiz you about your Kazakhstan notes here? Oh, border official and gifts. Actually, that was quite a nice story.
Oh, yeah. So it's quite funny because in her, I think she was talking about bribes in her chapter about needing bribes and stuff. But, a border official just asked me if I had a coin from where I came from. And I'm like, oh, okay, this doesn't sound great. And I digged in my bag and I did have some coins probably from the last Australian airport I flew through when I paid cash for something. And one was a 20-cent coin with which has the platypus on it. And I think the platypus is probably I think it's well known, not as well known as a kangaroo. But anyway, I gave him the coin and I showed him and he didn't recognise it. So I wrote down what I thought was the closest approximation in Cyrillic because they wouldn't have had a different...
Yes, you Cyrillicified.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't.
Well done.
They wouldn't have had. Yeah, they wouldn't have had a word for it. They would have just written it in Cyrillic, and those letters are fairly easy to know. I don't think there's any weird Cyrillic letters there. You literally just translate the sounds as they go. And he was happy, and he gave me a coin, which I feel really bad about because I can't even remember what coin he gave me. It's just in my bag of foreign money from that country. So, but that was all the transaction was. And you're kind of like thinking, oh, this could be dodgy, but no.
Yes, because I'm giving money to an official, but if it's 20 cents with the platypus on, you're probably okay. But I can imagine when he asked you a bit on guard.
And I think because I had a guide, because I was on a small tour with all of these, just to make it easy to get in and out of these countries at the time, and we had guides helping us across borders and stuff like that. The guide was kind of keeping an eye on things, but he said, no, that's okay. He probably just collects stuff like that.
Exactly. Yes, and wouldn't meet too many Australians, and it's interesting to ask.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, in Kazakhstan, we also hear more about horses.
Yes.
My note was about the girls being chased on horseback, and the winning girl wins a vacuum cleaner.
Yes.
But,
lucky girls.
Yeah, I know.
I did see that, and I didn't hear. I think I did hear some stories about that, but we didn't see any of the chasing the girls around on horseback. No, well, it doesn't sound great to us, but probably owning a vacuum cleaner in that very valuable and probably makes their days very easy.
You're absolutely right. I should not scoff at the vacuum cleaner. You're quite right. Now, you made a note about the Kazakh polo.
Yeah, so I didn't see it in Kazakhstan, but I know it's very popular. I think in Afghanistan, it's also a very popular national sport. And I actually saw two games in Kyrgyzstan of this, and one was kind of put on for us to watch because the guide said, I think we can arrange a game here to watch if you want. And we had to buy the ball, which was a goat carcass or a goat. I think we actually bought a live goat.
Justin, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that bit.
I think I've got some pretty bad memories of this. I'm not going to share them, but it's a way of life there, and the game, like the winning team wins the goat, and the game kind of tenderizes the meat. That's how it's described.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your notes, the tenderized goat carcass.
Yeah. So all of that aside, and I completely get people who have issues with things like animal cruelty and everything like that, although, the animal is dead at the time. It's not like they're doing this to a live animal. And they,
Yep.
I believe, from what I was told, they make
Yes.
sure it doesn't suffer.
As a humane. Yeah. Okay, good.
However, I guess the skills of these horsemen, and it's a bit like these horses. I'm more worried about the horses, to be honest, because the horses are all in this scrum and they're trying to get the goat off some guy's horse, and then often the goat is on the ground, and these guys can gallop along and kind of go sideways on their horse and reach down, pick it up, and then get back up onto the saddle.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's amazing.
Yeah, so that level of skill
level is interesting.
The skill level in the, like I said, it's very common, I think, in all of Central Asia, but I saw it more in Kyrgyzstan, which I'll talk about when we get there. And but yeah, it's a very interesting game. They can range, I believe, from like a timed game to going all day and all night or some ridiculous thing until someone scores. So it's
wow.
they've got various things. I think they literally do now have some of these countries now have like a semi-professional league. It used to just be played by the nomads and stuff, but now they've kind of got they've kind of got formal competitions going, and they actually have uniforms and stuff going. And,
interesting. Okay, I think we need to move on to Tajikistan. Now, my first comment about Tajikistan, or about the chapter, is my intrigue about the Trident support company who found a niche in making taller and taller flagpoles for Central Asian countries. Yes. So there's a company who had specialized. There was like only one company where you can get a crazy, crazy, crazy tall flagpole. Where did they get? Did they get to like 100? Am I right in thinking it's 190 odd meters? I mean, it sounds crazy now that I say it. But
I think
was it 90?
Was something. It was 140. I think the tallest one now, maybe, but it wasn't in Central Asia anymore. I think one of the Arab countries decided to get in on the game and have the tallest flagpole, because they like those kind of games, tallest buildings, tallest flagpoles, and stuff like that. So
crazy, isn't it? I was off with my 190. Yeah. The tallest one is currently 171, but the ones in Tajikistan was, no, I can't find it. But anyway, 133, 162. Oh, no, that was in Azerbaijan. Oh, anyway, these guys were just like competing. Taller and taller and taller flagpole.
Taller flagpoles, which would require a big flag for it to be even look right as well. So the flags were probably massive, you know.
Yes, I wonder if there was another company that was like cornered the market in massive flags.
Like,
I don't know.
Like I'm thinking like the flag may have been half the size of a football field kind of thing.
Yeah, because if it's like so far up,
you've
got to be able to see it even properly.
Or at least 20 meters sort of high. Because if you've got a 140-metre flagpole, you're going to need it to be 10 or 20 metres.
Otherwise it'd be this tiny little thing on the end of a massive pole. And
so anyway, and they'd be laughed at, and that's not what
exactly. Yes, you can't ridicule a tall flagpole. I mean, I am ridiculing a tall flagpole, but anyway. So anyway, that's the kind of quirky stuff I love to read about, and so I particularly liked that part in Tajikistan. And we both noted the other thing was the divorce by mobile telephone.
Yeah, I had heard about this too. Now, Tajikistan's one of the five I haven't been to, but I think someone brought it up with one of the guides, and I can't remember which country it was, but wasn't completely uncommon throughout the region, because Islam was, I think, reasonably common across the region, and the Russians kind of basically suppressed it, and there's still a lot of, I think the worry is they see the radical kind of states issues that they've had in other countries, and they're still trying to keep that on top. But so I think the Tajikistan one, where they banned the whole divorce by texting the word 3 times, was banned. But I did hear that people were doing it over the phone and stuff like that. And
I mean, I must confess that as a divorced person in Australia, the paperwork to be divorced is massive, time-consuming, and really annoying. And if we could have just done it by text with 3 words, I've got to say, maybe not so bad. Yes. But obviously, that's when it's amicable.
The other side, the other side to this is that you get this overwhelming feeling that these people, if they can get into Russia somehow, and often this is a job, and then they marry a Russian wife, and I think some of it was like sometimes they keep sending some money back to their old wife, but after a while that would sort of stop because they more likely have children with their Russian wife and
yes,
move on. There's certainly that feeling that a goal in life is if you can get into, say, Russia somehow, whether it's a job or education or something like that, then that's a good stepping stone to a better life. And
I can't remember the stats and I didn't note them, but was it Tajikistan that had the most migrant workers?
Yeah, I think
and it was
so.
like some huge proportion of their GDP was money coming back from Russia. I can't remember, like a quarter or more. I can't remember, but it was a huge amount. So there was it's obviously quite, like you say, getting into Russia is quite the kind of life goal to improve things. Yeah.
And from what I've heard, the people who've been to, I know a couple of people who did go to Tajikistan after the trip I did, and most of them just kind of just went to the Pamir region because that's where it's the most scenic. But the response was, if you thought Kyrgyzstan was rough and undeveloped, then Tajikistan is another level of rough travel. But they said, it's definitely was one of the most scenic places they've been to in the world. And
that's one of the rabbit holes I went down while I was reading. I Googled and looked at lots of pictures because I wanted to see how beautiful it was.
And, with all these countries, you do get that authentic experience. You don't have to worry about it being overly fake or, there's what the tourists see because they don't. It's very hard to keep that separate. Like, sure, you can do a little bit of tour and have a nice-ish hotel in some of these places, but you can interact with the locals and get out into the countryside, and you get that experience. So
there's no over-tourism.
No, definitely not. Maybe Uzbekistan. It's probably the one I think is the most touristy, Uzbekistan.
We'll get to that, but not yet.
Not yet.
Did you have anything else in? Oh, Tajikistan, you just mentioned the time when they blocked YouTube for a few days. Yeah. Can you imagine?
And also
we're so lucky. Well, actually, I don't know. Sometimes I think I wish they would just stop all of the, I wouldn't mind a forced internet-free few days because there's always, it's in time intrusive. But yes, I would like to choose not have it forced on me.
Yeah.
All right.
You just need a trip somewhere.
Yes, exactly. Kyrgyzstan was our the fourth country
one she visited. Yes, and she did mention the relative freedoms and the ability to speak freely, and I think that was very evident just based on the guide I had in Kyrgyzstan. He didn't have any issues. He even talked about some of the bad stuff that we may come across, but I think, like she mentioned, they've got a parliament and a democracy. Some of the good stuff I came across was we were using community-based tourism, so homestays were very common.
Nice.
So, and they were reasonably comfortable. We were told to just be conscious of the fact that if you're going to use the showers, just don't have a long hot shower, because we had been doing a few days camping here and there on this trip. But the homestays, they were all very friendly. God, I feel like they just tried to make us put on weight because the amount of food that would come out. But you were sitting on a rug on the floor when you were eating. The mattresses were just kind of on the floor in the room. So it was usually just a place that had enough rooms. But I've got some really fond memories. And then you go up into these lovely valleys and stuff like that. There were sometimes some huts to stay in, or you just had to camp. But they seem to have a good mix going. Things seem to be a little bit more open and a little bit better there. There's no doubt that the people in the regions were still not that well off or anything like that, but they were at least thinking, hey, community-based tourism is as a way to help get more money into those regions.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because they had these resorts that sit on. There's a big lake in the island in the middle of the country. If you look on a map. And that lake has these Russian resorts on it, and all the Russians go there, or used to go there. I don't know if they still do. And that was their idea of a holiday. They'd go there, but that wasn't giving any money to sort of the outside those areas. So the whole community-based tourism idea sprung up, and of course the guys with the eagles. I don't know how many of them are around, but.
It sounded like there was a lot. It's obviously, the standard thing. Talia just said, yes, so she'd been there. So much food in Kyrgyzstan, but the table was beautifully set out and we never ate it all.
No. Because you get little snacks to start with, like a like maybe some biscuits and dates or dried fruits and stuff, or even just a little jar, like a bowl of boiled lolly type sweets or something like that. And then out would come like your breads and your dips, and borscht soup was common. There was quite a few soups. There was one called, and I don't know if it was in all countries, but there was one like a noodle soup, I think called lagerman or something like that I really, really enjoyed. But you'd always get a soup, and then there'd be more stuff, and it's
more, yeah,
and more. It was, the hospitality was just amazing.
Oh, that's so lovely.
It's the one, and Kyrgyzstan's the one country I say to anyone if they're ever thinking of going to a stand and they're worried about stuff. I always say Kyrgyzstan, and I say if you really don't want to do it yourself, just find a local company that will do a tour or a guide or something like that, and you'll really enjoy it. Because even Bishkek, the city, was quite nice. It's the one that was the least sort of dictatorified, if that's even a word, like where they haven't built huge edifices and buildings in their honour or anything like that. So it was very Soviet feeling, but it wasn't even that. I think it was quite a nice little compact city, And also the place to go if you want to go horse riding. I did horse riding around lakes with yurts, and you can do yurt stays. So there's a whole, I really thoroughly enjoyed that place. I don't think she probably did as much in Kyrgyzstan as I did, whereas she did more in other countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I was that was one thing. I wasn't disappointed, but it was like, such a short chapter on such a great country.
You would have liked to, that makes
But there was less controversy in the country, I guess, as well. So, yeah.
Yes, that's true. Sort of, yes, less to chat about. I noted that it was, and I think we discussed this earlier, the first president who wasn't an engineer. He was still a bit corrupt.
In case people didn't realise, I'm an engineer, so I'm worried I may have a
tendency to be a Central Asian dictator. It seems the career path, Justin. So
yeah.
But no, you made it back home to Australia, so I think you're safe.
Yes.
But yes, it was very interesting to note all of those. Although actually, I meant to dive down a rabbit hole and do some research, but I didn't. But when I was teaching in Slovakia, again, I had so many students who had trained as engineers in Soviet times. And then, by the time I got there, they were doing all kinds of other jobs, but perhaps it was a very, very common Soviet era.
I think it was, and I think I mentioned it when I emailed you. I said that I got the impression that the Soviets were all about building infrastructure and stuff like that. So engineers were in demand, and it was seen as a very good career, very good profession. So if you could become an engineer, your family, you'd be well off and stuff like that. So I think that at the time these guys went to school, that's what people did.
Yes,
if you wanted to be
right.
So
anyone who did well with school probably a lot of them would have gone down that path
and became an engineer.
Yeah. And then the Cold War finished and they didn't need all the engineers. The ones I met were mostly in marketing. And marketing didn't exist when they were going to school, because you don't need marketing in communism. So they had all suddenly been forced into these marketing roles and really didn't know what to do, but they were making the most of it. I
have pity for those poor engineers.
I know. It's quite a different skill set, isn't it? So,
yes, it is.
And it was always fascinating. It's probably a bit different now, but this was not that long after, the Cold War had finished. And so they were just fumbling their way through what is marketing. We don't even understand advertising, let alone, it was really fascinating. So, all right. It's probably time to move on to Uzbekistan, our final stand. So this was...
look, the one thing there's a few things that stood out. Uzbekistan was... I went from Turkmenistan to Uzbekistan, and it didn't feel like it was hugely different in a lot of ways, but it was. But things like, and she mentions in her book about, she literally says Uzbeks are masters of money counting. And that's because at the time they had, the biggest note was 1,000 som, but I forget how many som it was to $1.
A lot.
8,000 or something like that som. So $100 note you'd end up cashing in, and you'd end up getting bricks of cash, and you'd get a plastic bag, and
you'd feel like a millionaire.
The biggest note, but it was such a pain to carry around. And,
absolutely.
We'd go to a restaurant, and 4 of us would have a meal, and the bill would be 300 and something thousand som. And it made it kind of easy to split the bill because, hey, everyone had the same notes and you just chuck in your 80 or 50 or 100 notes. And and if you're out by one, if they went to the restaurants would have a money counter, they put this brick of money in and go, and it would count the money because otherwise you'd be there all day.
Yes.
And I think shortly after, a couple of years later, they introduced, or a year later, they introduced a 5,000. I think they've got bigger notes now. Right. I think their current leader is a little bit more open to things. And he probably also realizes that he's sitting on a tourist gold mine in terms of the natural history. They've got some amazing, the three cities that everyone goes to see, Khiva, Bukhara and Samarkand, they're what people go to the Silk Road. That's what they go to see, those three cities.
Yeah. And
then there's also the stuff to do with the RLC that's pretty sad, how that's all receded and that. But those three cities are, I think Tashkent, the capital, Bukhara and Samarkand are now all linked by like a high-speed train, or at least a much better train.
That. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So the tourism infrastructure is more advanced, and they have that stuff that people who don't know much about the region will still be drawn to.
While I think Kyrgyzstan is probably one of the nicest ones for tourists in terms of the scenery and everything like that, and I think Uzbekistan is the other one. But Uzbekistan, you could probably just get off the plane, get your hotel in Tashkent, and then you just catch your train to Samarkand and Bukhara and see those cities. I don't know if it's gone to Khiva yet, but it was just we had. I just remember the trip from Khiva to, I think it was Bukhara, and it was just on this road. It was 10 hours or so on a bumpy, pothole-ridden road. It was just one of the least enjoyable days of travel I've ever been to. Probably longer than 10 hours too.
Yeah.
And now you think about how people can just zip around the country on a nice modern train.
Sally just commented here. Sally just said it's like a bullet train and very comfortable. So quite different. Yeah.
So and when Erika was there, the train was 2015 or 16 or 17 even, maybe it was in that. But I think Khiva, she mentions in a book it looks really old, but a lot of it's just kind of been rebuilt over years and years. So you've got that very authentic feel, but everything looks a lot older than it is, and it's just so amazing place. I remember, I'm not a morning person, but I remember getting up at 5 a.m. on the last day and just wandering these streets, and it's just the original leaders were not as that nice either. They were just slightly less crazy than, I guess, Turkmenistan is the way I would describe it.
Yeah, which is not a very good bar to be slightly better than.
But I think things are changing. I think from what I did read that even visas to get in the country now are easier. So, it's
interesting. Yes, it sounds like a very interesting place. I was my point of note was the weirdness of, the leaders and stuff, and the daughter. The president's daughter, who had all these multiple careers, including a musician. And, this is like typical of the multifaceted thing.
Yes.
But the influences for her music, I wrote this down because I was like, Massive Attack, Moby, Adele, and Sade. I was like, how do you combine these influences? I actually wanted to go and Google and forgot to do it and see if I could find some of her music, because I thought, that's a really eclectic mix to name as your influences. What comes out of that? I don't know. Yeah,
I can't say I listened to all four of those people, and I don't think anyone ever does. There's such a diverse range.
Yeah, they're really diverse
of artists.
I don't know how you combine it. So no. So I must.
Adele and Sade, maybe. But
yes, exactly. It leads to some vague kind of but the rest. I quite like them all, but they're really different. It's not something I would think to combine. So
So she's, and she got. It wasn't very clear in the book about why and how she got arrested, because whether her father just decided she was pushing things too far, or
it was a bit a bit grey.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's one thing I didn't know much about. That was something in the book which was really new to me because I hadn't heard about it too much. But I think a lot of that came after my visit as well. So
yes, maybe.
And the other thing I found with Uzbekistan was, and she mentions a lot of this in the book, is the historical figures. They really actually do revere these historical figures. So there's a Timurlane, as I was known, but she calls him Timurlenk. The locals were like saying, "Oh, have you heard of Timurlane?" I go, "Yes." Oh, and the only other thing they'd ever say was better than Genghis Khan. And I'm like going, yes,
Okay,
in
yes.
my top 10 list of marauding conquerors, I've put him at the head of Genghis Khan. It was just, I was just like, yeah. But, he was a famous, I guess they saw him as a famous Uzbek. And the one I liked was Oleg Beg because he was more into the sciences and less into the conquering and stuff. And so there's quite a lot in around with him as well. Like she mentions the remains of his sextant and where he did his astronomy from and everything like that. And so I think there's a museum from memory there and it's up on a hill. So it was really good to see all of that. And they revered him just as much. It was like, oh, yeah, he was such an influential person and such a smart person as well. So it's definitely, look, I loved Uzbekistan because it just had so much variety in what you could see and do in that area. So
yeah, it did sound like, and so much, so much of the interesting history. I mean, as a mathematician, my first degree is mathematics.
Yeah.
I liked that she talked about the guy whose name was Algorithmi, as in like the word algorithm derived from him. I'm like, that's interesting. That's the kind of thing. I'm like, I love those little facts. So
and I think even in your little poll on who had been there, I think Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan were the two countries that had the most visitors, and I think that there's a good reason for that. But the whole place is just it's a fascinating part of the world, and even just the recent politics of it is just
oh, absolutely. Like I was saying, I just kept going off and researching bits because I just had to know more about and especially what's happening today. On this, I wanted the updates on things. So if you looked at my search history for the last few weeks, it would the stands feature prominently. Because I wanted to know a bit more on all these little bits. So,
and I can't even tell you what made me want to go there in the first place either. At the time, I was really trying to think, why did I go there? And I think it was just literally, you can do a trip to these places.
Yeah,
and
so well, I think because when we were at school, of course they existed, but they didn't exist as independent countries.
No,
and so I've always been fascinated by by all of the ex-Soviet.
I still get fascinated as well by the differences in some of these Soviet republics, because this is like one of those ones. Like I know Chechia's one that is a bit controversial. Like why wasn't it allowed to be independent? And even now, Ukraine and Georgia and Russia's not necessarily seeing eye to eye in their parts of the world, and so they're still very much it's still, I would say, a little unstable, but whereas interestingly in the stands, the little bit of instability was in and around the three-way border with Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and religion and ethnicity and that. And so I remember when I went there in 2012, there was still this instability, and part of the reason we went to Kazakhstan for a few days was to avoid some of these borders, and so to avoid some of the borders in these valleys that were potentially an issue. Like nothing happened when I was there, but
so with a group of tourists, better to just go a different way around.
To avoid it, and it was fine because I got to see the bit parts of Kazakhstan that were amazing as well. Like I've got to go back there because I didn't get to see Astana or Almaty as it was called then. I think it's Nur Sultan now.
Yes. They like to change the names, don't they?
Well, and that was the leader after him.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So
I know, it's fascinating, isn't it? keeps us on our toes, and we can never be too sure for those pub quizzes on geography. You've got to be up to date. Oh dear. Well, it definitely makes me want to go travelling. So I guess I think it's doing its job then. So
yes, it's definitely a very good travel book, and it's a very good book that covers the history and the details of all these countries. Like I think. Yes.
Yeah, super interesting to read if you're heading there. Yeah,
if you want to go there, read the book. If you're just interested in other countries, like this isn't one about how someone had a funny thing and caught the wrong bus.
It wasn't a long war.
Like no, it wasn't a long war. This wasn't.
No, it is very much a portrait of these 5 countries. So
I don't think she had any. I'm trying to think of an interaction with a local that was kind of humorous. I mean, there were some that were from outside looking in, but or like, but yeah, it's not that kind of book. It's
No,
she does a very thorough trip. She doesn't just visit the tourist hotspots and even the touristy places in Uzbekistan. Traveler. She briefly covers. She doesn't like. She highlighted the Registan in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, which is just a really amazing place. And I think Ulugh Beg built a madrasa, which is just like a school, and then another person built. So these 3 schools are overlooking this one square, and you get these magnificent facades of like these Islamic madrasas with blue tiles and everything. And it's just like a really amazing place to go visit. And she didn't really cover a lot of that. She covered the history why these were built, but she didn't go into that. It was she wasn't going there for
on the tourist.
I think she was probably no. She did, but at the same time, she brushes over the stuff that you probably find elsewhere really easily. And
exactly. So yeah, oh no, I really enjoyed it. So tick for this.
So. I did too, but like I said, I underestimated how long it was going to take to read it. So
yes, me too. It doesn't look that big until you get into it. Yeah, I have to say. I mean, I confess, I finished it last night. So
I was on Thursday or Friday. So
yeah, you were ahead of me. So, but I did enjoy it. So anyway, this is it for Book Club for 2021. Thank you, Justin, a million times over for being my most fabulous co-host, because it's so much more fun to talk to someone about our books, and it's also good because I get to definitely catch up with you every month or so.
Yes.
This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.